Today at our DC Cybersecurity Summit, we are going to kick off our presentations with David Grady, Security Evangelist from Verizon. David, take it away.
Hi, I'm Dave Grady from Verizon. Thanks for joining me for my talk today. I really appreciate you coming by the virtual stage. I wish I was there in person, and I'm sure you all wish you were there too. But I can tell you from the last couple of cyber summits that have happened online in the last few weeks, this is an excellent platform. So make the most of it, interact as much as you can. And please swing by the Verizon booth. We've got a tremendous amount of information there about Verizon's cybersecurity services, in case you didn't know that we do a lot of work in the cybersecurity space here at Verizon. So I want to start my presentation by asking you a question. Normally, if I was there in person, I'd be asking for a show of hands, but I have a question for you. What possibly is there left for you to talk about when National Cybersecurity Awareness Month rolls around in a couple of weeks in October? I mean, since mid-March, every day has been Cybersecurity Awareness Month for stressed out end users and for corporate security teams like you. If you work in security, you probably spent the last 5 or 6 months, gently and repeatedly reminding your suddenly remote workforce about the dangers of phishing emails and the evils of public Wi-Fi. And as COVID-19 drove more and more employees to work from home, you probably also banged the drum over and over again about why employees shouldn't discuss sensitive topics on poorly secured video conferencing platforms. You probably sent out all employee emails reminding people about the risks of working in the presence of their always listening smart devices, or their smart speakers who are eavesdropping, or even their kids who might overhear confidential information. All these reminders really make it hard for us as security people who have to plan for Cybersecurity Awareness Month this coming October to think about what the heck are we going to talk about. I mean, what is left, what is new for us to come up with something fresh for that time of year again. So I have some ideas. It's a modest proposal, but I want to really encourage you to think about this. Instead of focusing your security awareness efforts yet again on those end users, why not put your energy into sort of managing up, right? Making senior leaders and these other security program influencers the primary target of your National Cybersecurity Awareness Month outreach efforts, right? When I talk about, security influencers, what I mean is these are the people who really influence the security program budgets and the priorities. These are the people who own the business processes that can bring risk to the organization. And these are the people who can play an important role, whether they know it or not, when and if your company finds itself on the wrong end of a ransomware attack, say, or a major compromise, right? So what I want to show you today is that Verizon has put together a number of reports that are free for you to look at and download that can really help you sort of freshen up your National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, outreach efforts this October, but not just going after your end users, but really trying to communicate to the decision makers and the security influencers some of the key facts and figures and information and insight that they might benefit from to help, improve the overall security posture of your organization. So let's look at some of these reports. So first, there's the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. You may be familiar with that. Some of us refer to it as the DBIR, or here in Boston, the DBIR. The DBIR is a really valuable report that gets into sort of global trends and insight into actual data breaches and actual security incidents. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that. Another report that you can use to influence your influencers is Verizon's Mobile Security Index. This is a report that looks specifically at some of the threats and some of the risks that come with mobile device usage, particularly as mobile devices become so central to the business, certainly during this pandemic. Then there's the Insider Threat Report. This is something that Verizon put out late last year, but still has a tremendous amount of value to you as you're working to influence particularly people in the business lines who are security program influencers who may not realize just how much impact insider threat can have on the business. And then there's another report we put out every year at Verizon called the Payment Security Report. Payment Security Report looks at some interesting insight into the difference between PCI compliance and actual PCI security. So all four of these reports are available for download, and I'll again get into that a little bit later about where you can get these, but they're free. And they're also written in a way that's really not filled with, advertising or marketing. It's filled with data, and it's filled with actionable data. And it's written all of these reports are written in a very accessible way that you can sort of read and understand and share with people who might not live and breathe, technology or security all the time. So it's a great tool to, as I said, influence the influencers. So let's first look at the DBIR, the Data Breach Investigation Report. We put this out every year. For the last 13 years or so, we've been putting out the DBIR annually. Our most recent one, the 2021, came out in late Q1, early Q2 of this year. And it's an amazing report in that this year it's got almost twice as many data points in it for analysis that yielded the report. What the DBIR does, almost twice as many as the year before. What the DBIR does is it looks at and collects information from all over the world, from partners, from law enforcement, from government agencies, about actual data breaches and about security incidents that really rose to a very high level that needed a response. So this isn't a survey. It's not about best practices. Verizon created a language for the standardized submission of this information from law enforcement, from government agencies, from partners, and et cetera. And that language is called VERIS, which is the vocabulary for event recording and information sharing. And you can, look up that on a search engine, but VERIS. Basically, the VERIS language talks about the actors, who did what, the action they took, that's the what. Talks about the asset that they went after. Was it a server? Was it a database? Was it an endpoint? They talk about the attribute that they went after. Was it the confidentiality or the integrity or the availability of that asset? So when organizations submit this information, it's a lot easier for us to pull together the tens of thousands of pieces of information that were submitted about thousands and thousands of actual data breaches. What the DBIR does is it analyzes all the attack patterns and who the actors were. Were they internal actors? Were they external actors? Were they business partners? Were they foreign governments? Things like that. And it looks at, again, like the actions they took and such. And then it tells you by industry, which is so important, how the bad actors went after successfully certain industries, right? So what I mean is the way bad actors go after a hotel chain or after a retail organization is very different from the way they attack, say, a hospital or a manufacturer. And the report, the DBIR, really breaks down for you by industry the most common and repeatable and successful ways that in the previous 12 months the bad guys attacked certain industries, the tools they used, the methods they used, the attributes that they went after, the assets that they attacked most of the time. What we see when we look at the DBIR, each year is that there's a sort of a subset of attack patterns that are common across all industries. It doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing, it doesn't matter if you're in healthcare, it doesn't matter if you're in financial services. There are certain ways that are most common. Those involve, web application attacks and DDoS attacks and phishing and social engineering and such. But again, each industry specifically has very different sort of an attack profile, and the report gets into that. So it's very helpful for you if you work in one of those industries. Some high-level takeaways from the 2020 DBIR: we looked at 32,000 security incidents and almost 4,000 confirmed data breaches from the previous 12 months. What we found there was that 67% of them, more than 2/3 of those breaches, involved just three types of attacks: credential theft, errors, and social attacks, right? We found that of all the malware incidents that we looked at, 27% of them had to do with ransomware, which really should set you back on your heels and make you realize that you need a ransomware sort of mitigation and response plan. We found that 58% of all the breaches in this report had to do with personal data, and that was twice as much as the 2019 report. That almost half of the breaches came from web application attacks, and that informs your understanding of whether or not your industry or your particular organization overly relies on web applications that might be under-secured or under-protected. So these kind of numbers are really helpful for you as a person who is, I guess, thinking about Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October, and how to share this kind of information, not again with just end users, but with the powers that be. What do numbers like these that are facts, not marketing material and not best practices, but facts that show these type of things happen more often than not? How does this data help you influence the influencers? I would suggest that if you share the DBIR with with that ecosystem of security influencers, these people might understand that they can make decisions or approve funding, budgets, reallocation of resources to address these particular issues. The things like credential theft. Are we doing enough to identify and stop that? Do we have the right resources around the web application security? Do we have a plan for ransomware attacks if something were to happen? So the DBIR is the first of these 4 reports that I'm going to talk about. But take a look here. You can see that we've broken down this year in the report by industry vertical segment by almost twice as many. This is twice as many vertical segments as the 2019 report. So accommodations in food services, arts and entertainment, construction, healthcare, and manufacturing, etc. All of these have sections in the data breach investigation report that get very specific. So if you work with companies in those industries, again, very helpful. There's also some regional segmentation data, and there's also some data in this report about small medium business and how small medium business are by no means immune to this type of to any real type of attacks. This is an example of how the report does a deep dive into an industry. So this one here looks at healthcare. We looked at about 798 incidents. 521 of those were confirmed data breaches in the previous year in healthcare organizations across the world. And what we saw, the top patterns, right? It talks about miscellaneous errors, talks about web applications, talks about how internal threat actors make up almost half of the bad guys when it comes to healthcare. And that number is so much higher than most other industries, right? So that means that if you're in healthcare, sure, you have to have your security focus on external bad actors trying to break in, but you also have to know that you need an insider threat program, something to look at internal bad actors who are, looking to steal health information, try and monetize that for fraud, or maybe they're just breaking HIPAA laws because they're curious and they want to look at, their ex-in-laws, health records or something to see what's going on with them. People are nosy, and that leads to a lot of HIPAA violations by insiders. The DBIR talks about actor motives in each industry. So again, in healthcare here, you see it's financial is the overwhelming motivating factor for data breaches in healthcare, but a certain percentage of it is for fun. And then it talks about the kind of data that gets compromised. The DBIR, too, for you to, again, communicate with these stakeholders and influencers for your program is really helpful because it talks about the top controls, those CSC, Center for Cybersecurity controls, that can be implemented to mitigate, these particular attack risks. So it's, again, very helpful in that regard. We're really proud of the DBIR. It really is sort of the gold standard from our perspective and from the perspective of many in the media and in the community about the value of this report. If you find it online, which is easy to do, go to VerizonEnterprise.com or just use your favorite search engine to find the DBIR. You can pull it down as a PDF. You can sort of scroll through it online. You can grab a URL for a particular industry, say, and share it with a friend or a colleague or a program influencer. So it would be, a specific URL pertaining to, say, healthcare or financial services. And that's a great way to make that portable. And there's also some sort of ancillary information alongside there with the report. Particularly one is a risk assessment tool to help you understand how risky the industry is that you're currently working in based on the DBIR data. Now, another report that we put out is the Mobile Security Index, and this one is particularly valuable today in this age of COVID. Now, the Mobile Security Index was also released a little bit earlier this year, right before COVID really hit. And it was researched, in a few months before that, but it's particularly helpful now that so many people are working from home, so many people are using mobile devices to get their job done, and now that so many organizations are relying on mobile devices to keep the engines running and the business going all together. The Mobile Security Index is different from the DBIR in that it's more of a survey and less of a collection of actual information about breaches. But there's also contributions from some of the key partners that Verizon works with in mobile security, different aspects of mobile security from MDM to IoT and other elements of mobile devices. But the Mobile Security Index talked to several hundred, close to 1,000 different organizations around their perception of the importance of security when it comes to mobile devices. And what we found in this report, the big takeaway, is that a lot of organizations confess to not making mobile security a major priority. And that some organizations actually sort of look at mobile security not as central to the security program, but more as something to do with the commodity management as opposed to a data management issue. And the report really gets into some of the reasons why organizations don't put enough emphasis on security for mobile endpoints, and a lot of the reasons why organizations don't do it is for convenience, and they think that it can slow them down or take them off the important things, which is silly, because we know that mobile security is absolutely critical and it is an important thing. So if it's hard or it's inconvenient to do, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be doing it. The Mobile Security Index is also really useful because it's got a lot of information in there about the different sort of dimensions of mobile security and mobile risk. First, it talks about the end users, but when we are talking and looking at this report, potentially as something you can use to communicate with, program influences during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the Mobile Security Index talks about things like the importance for controls, not just at the end user level, but at the network level and at the application level, right? So what that means is that our business units relying on certain applications that get downloaded to phones or tablets that fuel the business, and do those applications have the right security in place? Do they have excessive permissions, right? Do they eavesdrop on conversations? Do they have access to the camera? Do they really need all that? Are there risky applications that are not being blocked and that people can use an app store to pull down applications for their mobile devices that might not have the proper security in place and could imperil the corporate network? So the Mobile Security Index it's a great conversation starter to challenge your security stakeholders and your security influencers around whether or not they're paying enough attention to mobile security. This report, again, available for free, downloadable online, like the DBIR. You can use the search engine or go to VerizonEnterprise.com. The Mobile Security Index also has a tool that you can use to develop an acceptable use policy for your end users. And again, I would use that to maybe collaborate with security program influencers, business line managers, executives, to take that as a template and build it out so you can have a custom-made acceptable use policy for your entire organization based on the insight that this report gives you. The third report I want to share with you is Verizon's Insider Threat Report. Now, this was published again late last year, 2019, but it still has a tremendous amount of value today. If you look at the new 2020 DBIR report, you see that insiders, partners, employees, vendors, and such, they play a significant role in data breaches. In all industries across the board, it's like somewhere between 30 and 40%. And again, in some industries, it's higher than others. And the Insider Threat Report is really interesting because it doesn't make you think that everybody who works with you and for you is a bad person, but it does help you understand sort of the dynamics that can emerge inside of an office environment or in a working environment that can lead to data breaches. And it breaks down some of the sort of personas of people who can play a role in either directly or indirectly in data breaches who are insiders. It talks about careless workers, people who leave files on the subway train or on the bus that have sensitive information, people who lose laptops and stuff like that, people who are sending emails to themselves to work on at home with attachments with sensitive information so they can work on that spreadsheet on their Google Docs, unsecure, on the weekend. The report looks at insiders who have been compromised, who steal information for a number of reasons. They could be mad and they want to, they're going to quit, or they didn't like their annual review, so they're going to sabotage systems or mess with the integrity of systems or the availability of systems, or they're going to steal sensitive information and start a competing business. And they're going to steal your pricing information or all of your customer lists and things like that. There's malicious insiders who have been compromised and they've been recruited to steal information, maybe unwittingly or maybe wittingly. And then there's third parties, which is included in insider threat. Third parties are, you heard about the big retailer that was hit by a major data breach that gave them a big black eye, and they came in through the HVAC system with a third party. As more and more companies, have these complex ecosystems with other partners or vendors who are touching their IT systems or managing or handling their data, those third parties can bring a tremendous risk of data breach as well. So the Insider Threat Report, again, is a great tool for you to talk to business line managers, people who manage other people who decide to work with third parties, people who put into place systems or IT processes and procedures that might lead to data leakage. Why do you have such a a business process that relies so heavily on email when maybe you need a secure portal to exchange information with customers or partners. Why do some organizations like in healthcare still use fax machines? Personally, I've seen that issue with lost faxes with sent from one provider to another on behalf of my kid, as an example, and that sensitive information on the fax got lost 3 times before they finally successfully found the fax. So using the insider threat report to challenge a business leader on why their processes are engineered in such a way that insiders might end up causing a data breach. Great report there. And then another report that I want to remind you about, I mentioned, is the payment security report. Now, the payment security report comes out every year, which means a new one will be coming out before the end of this one. And the payment security report's really helpful for you to talk with those people who can make the following happen. And the following is this. Compliance with PCI, payment card industry standards for the digital security is not a one-time thing. You shouldn't think about just achieving compliance, checking the box, and moving on. It's all about sustaining that compliance. You need to be able to keep that compliance up all year long, and that requires a concerted effort. That requires not a tiger team to get together and do it and then show up for the audit and then say we're done and then let all the controls slip. So to have that as a continuing effort, as a continuing investment of time and energy and resources, that's an important decision that influencers really need to get behind. And the report also gets into the difference between PCI compliance and actual PCI security, because there is a sort of a delta between those two things. So as a educational tool for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, for those influencers who, again, not those end users, but the people sort of higher up the food chain who can move the needle and help things happen, use the payment security report to help them see the benefits of investing time and energy and effort into maintaining continuous compliance and continuous security. And finally, because you've been such a great audience, or at least I hope you've been a great audience, we have one more report, a bonus report that I want to show you from Verizon. And this one I think could be particularly helpful to you as you plan your Cybersecurity Awareness Month activities, aimed at, again, not the end user, but more about being aimed at the influencers and the powers that be, as it were, in your organization who can really help improve the security posture. And that is the Verizon Incident Preparedness and Readiness Report. This is also known as the VIPR report. The VIPR report looked at several hundred engagements that Verizon has done over the last few years, evaluating and assessing the readiness plans, the incident response plans of real companies that we work with. And we looked at a bunch of different elements of those plans. And one particular thing stood out is that in almost 57% of all the plans that we reviewed, stakeholders, those security influencers that I've been talking about for the last half hour, stakeholders had not been required to get together and practice the elements of the incident response plan. And I think this is tragic because, as we saw in the DBIR, there's a huge issue with ransomware and malware. And should an organization find itself in the middle of a ransomware attack, and it's been more than a year since they've even practiced their incident response plan, these security influencers, these stakeholders, the head of HR, the head of public relations, the head of the law department, the business line managers whose critical applications have been kicked offline by ransomware, these people have to be involved in what the response is going to be, what the containment plan is going to be. And if they haven't practiced that skill in more than a year, they're going to be very rusty. So I would highly recommend that you look at the VIPR report, the Verizon Incident Preparedness Readiness Report, and look at the data that's in there about the maturity and the robustness of security incident response plans, and use this report to influence those people out there who are going to be involved in that 3 o'clock in the morning ransomware conversation, and show them the dangers and the risks of not having a high level of preparation. So that's your bonus report, the VIPR report. So all 5 of these are available online. Again, VerizonEnterprise.com. And since you're going to be trying to, if you take my advice, communicating and influencing the non-end user, because you've been talking to them all year with COVID, I would recommend that in addition to focusing your security awareness efforts on these influencers and on these executives, that you let the rest of the organization know that this time around in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, you're doing that, right? That you're sort of that you're going after the powers that be and the senior ups and the mucky mucks as the primary target for cybersecurity awareness. Now, again, you'll have to remind everybody about the best practices, But I think that the end user population, which has been so saturated with, reminders about malware and such during the last 6 months and about reducing the risk of working at home, they would probably appreciate the fact that they're not going to get the same messages this October. So I want to wish you the best of luck in October when Awareness Month comes around. I want to wish you a good day today at this conference virtually. Please stop by the Verizon booth. Many of the reports that I mentioned here are available there as well. And we will see you hopefully in person next year.